Hi, Ryan.
Hello, Rachel.
How are you?
Oh, I am both overwhelmed and truly excited at the same time. How about yourself?
I'm a little bit in shock.
Shock and terror, perhaps?
No, shock and excitement.
Oh,
shock and excitement.
You're excited too, so
Yeah.
we can both agree on that. I mean, it's been a fun time for you.
Yeah.
We're back into our full work modes, and you're in full teaching mode, and you're going to have to deal with the school musicals. So
Yeah.
it's very exciting times. But I think we have something a little bit more exciting than Mamma Mia, the musical at your local high school production today. So,
Yes.
I don't know.
oh, someone's
I don't
coming
know.
in.
Start singing.
Start singing. Where was the musical episode of Space Above and Beyond? We got Tuck. He gave us a lot, but where was the full musical? I wanted that.
That was like episode 11. You don't start singing on shows till season 11.
Until it's a Christmas episode, right?
Yeah. No, well, we had that too, though.
Yeah, that's where he got to grab out the guitar. But we are back to do some interviews for people who were involved in Space Above and Beyond, a series that we covered on our podcast. One of the few podcasts that have actually gone in depth and episode by episode breakdowns of Space Above and Beyond. Something that I've watched many times before, and something, Rachel, that was completely new to you on this experience. And who are we joined by today? Who has been talking to us about the great Mamma Mia musical?
Yeah, that would be Glenn and Kristen.
I'm not talking till you sing a couple lines.
I'll teach you, Rachel.
Queen or whatever.
Hey, Ryan was the one that brought it up.
I did bring it up, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I've done theatre before. Mamma Mia, here we go again. My. I'm just trying to remember ABBA songs. I don't like ABBA very much.
Honey.
There we go. That's okay. We're done.
We're done. Thank you for joining us both today. But no, we are joined by... Come on, Rachel. Give us all the details. Who are the important players in the room with us today? Is it Pags? Is Pags here today?
No.
Is Pags in the room with us?
He's probably somewhere in Australia.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
would
Australian.
be.
We have messaged Pags. He is doing well.
Okay.
He is an acting teacher, so he's doing well.
Oh, good.
But no, we are joined by our good friends,
Glenn Morgan and...
Kristen Cloke. Morgan, right? You have Morgan at the end too?
When I work as a writer or an actor, I still go by Kristen Cloke, but in my regular life, I go by Kristen Cloke Morgan. It's a lot to chew on, so it's really Kristen's just fine.
Kristen's just fine. So yes, one of the co-creators of Space Above and Beyond, and the lead actress, one of the lead actresses of Space Above and Beyond, has entered the chat, and this is so much for us to take in. When we just started doing space, there was always like a little bit of a, maybe we'll talk to some of the people involved, but never thought we'll get to this level. But I just want to ask a question straight up top that's a bit silly, but it does haunt me. One of my favorite episodes was Choice or Chance, and I wanted to know who wrote that episode, because I go to IMDb and it says Doc Johnson, who has no other writing credits, and it sounds like an alias.
Wow, you went to the tough question first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wait, I'm going to answer that. But here's my thing. I'm doing this entire interview
Oh no.
wearing this helmet.
I did not know this was happening.
I'm going to wear this the whole time. Kristen's having a panic attack because they hated these. And I stole it when the show's over.
But I do love that we have it. We have some cute pictures of my daughter wearing it when she was little. I do love that we have it, but I just don't want to put it on.
No one's worn it in 30 years
Yeah.
or whatever it's.
Yeah.
Wow. We were going to ask if you took any things from the sets, because
There it is.
some of the others
There's your
have, some
question.
of the others didn't. And of course, you got to take one of the big helmets. They look like there were a lot to work in, let's just say. They fogged up quite a lot.
They go. You wore them.
They were the helmets were tough because they were steamy, so they would steam up because you'd have to do dialogue, and you couldn't run fans in them when you had dialogue because the fans made too much noise. and the helmets were mic'd. So, the helmets were an evolving thing, that, when we first had them, when we were in Australia on Mars, they were so hot. And I'm sure I'm repeating the stories that everybody else has told, that we had 40 pounds of equipment on our back in the desert of Australia in Noosa, I think it was. And it was really hot. So, we had the jumpsuits and turtlenecks and helmets and backpacks. So the helmet thing was hard because you had to work out dialogue and breathing and, normal stuff like that.
Now, Glenn, I'm noticing that you're not answering the.
I just wanted to wear the helmet.
Are you Doc Johnson? Is that the mystery?
No, there was a couple when, Jim and I, I don't know, it's like it happens a lot. Is like if people feel like, well, they haven't done a show, they might need help. Which Jim and I did a lot on X-Files, which was a complicated show, and we were like, okay, whatever. And there was these two guys, Steve Zito.
Wait, let me just clear this up. By a lot, he means when you're writing and you're on a writer staff and you have a lot of people, oftentimes, you'll have other writers who rewrite other writers. And you usually just, the original writer is credited and the person who rewrites is normally not credited. So that's what Glenn Morgan means by, we did a lot on the X-Files. So,
yes. But in production, Jim and I kind of knew what was going on, but Tom and Steve Zito, they were trying to turn this. Jim and I had sold this and were adamant that this was World War II in space, that it was as grounded as you could get, that it was the opposite of Star Trek, that it was very based on the look of Apollo and NASA in the 60s when I grew up, and the ceilings were low and there wasn't a lot of like crazy sci-fi stuff. And Tom and Steve felt otherwise. And we had a fight. And I'm like, no, it goes this way. And when you're executive producer, you're allowed to, this is what the show goes. And so we rewrote it. And Jim and I, even when we rewrote it, we never arbitrated to take credit. And Tom, I think.
I don't remember
which one it was. He was Steve, went Doc Johnson, which, is a sex toy.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to have that pre-registered. I believe that in order to put a pseudonym on a script, you have to have it pre-registered. So Jim and I had Bill Bloodworth was our anonymous name, pseudonym. So that's where that comes from.
Fair enough. It was because we both really like that episode, and you see this name, you're like, that's not real. And then you look on IMDb as you do, and it's no one else. There's no other credits underneath it. So I thought there has to be a story. I wanted to get that little goofy one kind of out of the way.
I think he quit. He quit, or I fired him. I don't remember. It's like I haven't thought of it for all that. It was not fun.
No, but Rachel, how about you take us back to
now a happy question?
Yeah, happy question.
A happy question.
We hope it's a happy question. It should be a simple one, but I'm sure you'll have a lot to say.
Well, sometimes like these sound straightforward, but they're not so much. Our first sort of real question was for Glenn, what was the genesis of Space Above and Beyond?
Jim and I went to work at Stephen J. Cannell, who is the legendary A-Team in Rockford Files, and we worked on 21 Jump Street. And there we met Peter Roth, who is a legendary studio executive. He has a star on the Walk of Fame, which is I don't know any other executive that has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And he worked with his executive. He worked with his Marilyn Osborne, and Peter was always like, well, "There's a new show," and he's like, "Star Trek is going to do Starfleet Academy. We should get him to it." And I'm like, "Well, they'll kill us." We're not going to do that. That's their territory. And Jim and I were like, Jim and I had we both went to Loyola Marymount University by the airport here. And together we took this class of fiction of war that had a big impact on us, like from the Iliad to the Forever War, which is Sci-Fi fans. It's just one of the best books ever. And we're like, how about World War II in space? And Peter was like, yeah. And then we just went through it was like a pilot, a 2-hour movie, everything. And then I think because of the success of the X-Files and a bunch of other things, that Peter Roth had a lot of muscle. And he's like, I want this. And I think that's why the pilot was 2 hours. That wasn't being done that much at the time, but it had gone from a pilot to a 2-hour movie. So if it doesn't get picked up, they have a 2-hour movie.
That makes sense. I must say, for us as sci-fi fans, it was very accustomed to have like the 90-minute to 2-hour TV movie pilot for a lot of shows. And what you said is very true. Like, you watch it and it doesn't have that. It's funny that you said the Starfleet Academy. They're still working on that, by the way. They're still trying to get that show off the ground.
Yeah.
But it is very true. Like, it doesn't really have that Star Trek feel. Like there's no colors, like no bright, colorful uniforms in this show. Everyone's in the drab kind of greens, browns, grays type of feel. But Rachel, what's the next thing that you are desperately wanting to know?
The next one's for Kristen, which was wanting to know about how you came on board for Space Above and Beyond.
That is a good question. Whenever I do these podcasts, it always leads back to Randy Stone, who was the casting director, and he played Spud, the bartender in Never No More, and he's passed, and it's so hard to talk about him because he's just one of those people who is really, really missed. Like, I always say that when I pulled back from acting to raise my kids, it turned out Hollywood really didn't miss me too much. Like, it was fine. Everything went on without me. But I think Randy Stone is one of those people that Hollywood is still missing. He's just one of those great, talented, incredible energy, great person. And this is actually, I don't know if I even tell this story. I don't even know if I tell this story too much. I auditioned for, he was the head of casting at Fox. And so I had auditioned for him I auditioned for the X-Files. I auditioned for, a bunch of stuff. And I had gotten an episode of a TV show. At that time, I liked to do episodes of TV shows. I was always afraid to commit to a TV series because I had this theory about my career at the time, which was not to be famous for anything bad. And which was a crazy theory because everybody just does everything now. Like, no one really cares. There's just so much content and whatever. It's like, it's water off a duck's back if you're in something crappy then. And so I did this episode of this show I think it was called Wild Oats. And it starred Paul Rudd and a bunch of other like very popular actors. And I remember, and I remember that they were all these really talented young kids, and some of them were happy about being on the show and some of them weren't, and it was like this whole exciting thing, and they were promoting the show. And I did the table read, and I got the job, and I did the table read, and then after the table read they fired me. And it was a political thing about something about the cast. And I don't really remember what the reason was, but Randy was furious. He didn't cast it, but one of his very close friends cast it. And she too actually has since passed. But he was so mad. He was so angry because he was a fan of mine and he always championed me. And so I went on, and that same week I got an offer to do Mad About You. So it was no problem. I went off and did Mad About You. And they actually called to bring me back after they did a table read with whoever they cast instead of me. And I was busy, so I couldn't do it. So Randy was really happy. And, we sort of bonded in a weird way over that. And so when Space came along, I was about to go. It was near the winter holidays, and the town really shuts down. So I was about to go off to see my parents who live in Arizona, and I got the script. My agent sent it to me, and I read it, and I really didn't think that I was right for the part because Shane was. I think I was in my mid-20s at the time, and Shane just seemed really young to me. I had really, by that time, I had already been working in the business for a while, and I just felt like she was such an innocent, and I didn't feel like, I just didn't think I was going to get it, and so I said to my agent, I'm not going to get this. I'm going on vacation. I'm good. And he called me back and he was like, Randy is not letting this go. He really wants, and Randy was casting it. He really wants you to read it, but he wants you to come in and read it with him first before you go to producers, because he has some stuff he wants to talk about. Because at that time I would just usually go to the producers. So I went in and I had read the script, and the scene that I auditioned for was the scene where I show Cooper my scar and he tries to kiss me. And the way it's written, for dramatic purposes, when he comes in to kiss her, she's very offended and begins to cry. And I was like, this character definitely does not cry because some guy tries to kiss her. That does not happen. So I went into Randy and I was like, I don't think I'm right for this. And I don't really agree with the direction of the character that's on the page or whatever it was. So he was like, no, you're right. It's not supposed to be that way. And so we worked on it. And then I went in and read for Glenn and Jim. And I like to tell the story. Everybody says, asks how we met as a couple. And I say I auditioned for him as a show. And after I did my first audition with him, I was walking out, and Glenn's a very soft-spoken person, especially when he doesn't know you. And I just hear, as I'm walking out, I just sort of hear this mumbling, and I look around and I'm like, I'm sorry, excuse me. And he had said, I liked you on Cheers, because I had done an episode of Cheers. And those are the first words that Glenn Morgan ever said to me. So that's two stories in one.
Wow.
So now her life is ruined. But as long as I'm going to jump in, because we won't stop talking about Randy. I mean, He founded, one of the founders, he won an Academy Award for a short film called Trevor, which led to the founding of the Trevor Project, which helped LGBTQ teenagers in the late 95, I guess, 96. And if you ever see Jodie Foster's directed this movie Home for the Holidays, I think Robert Downey Jr. is in that.
Yeah.
Randy's in the beginning. And he's like, it's a bit where I think
they used it in the commercial, the ad for it.
Yeah, he just has this great take. He's just like he has no lines. He's just an airline passenger, and he steals the movie. And he's just like, love.
I think they both pull away, and they're both pull away in cars driven by their parents. And the parents are talking, and Randy just gives this big eye roll. He was so funny and so cool and so smart and so talented, and he was just a fighter. And I don't know.
So he took like. You read and people come in, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, Joel and although I got to say, the network started going, like, don't make this the Rainbow Coalition, which meant there was a politician in the States, Jesse Jackson, who had the Rainbow Coalition. So, I mean, that was despicable. But so then Jim and I were like, no, this is what we're doing. So, but Randy took a big like to Rodney Roland. And he's like, and Rodney would have been a model. He was very new to all this. And he comes in to audition for Jim and David Nutter, who was the director. And they were like, and unbeknownst to us, Rodney had like 103 fever. I don't know what was going on with him. And, Rodney's Rodney. Like what you see in the show is not too far from Rodney. And we're just going, what the hell is this? And then he left. And Randy immediately starts to do damage control. I think Nutter wanted another guy, and he's like, he's on drugs. I'm like, yeah, something was up. Something was up with him. And Randy's like mad at Nutter, and it was like a whole thing. Rodney came in to read again, and his reading was really good, and he's obviously really handsome, and he had a whole different kind of thing. And so then Jim Wong and I is just like, took him outside, and it was, it's California, but it was December, it was cold, and we're like, are you fucked up? What's the story, buddy? And he's like, no, man, no, blah, 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 blah. And like, I believed him. And Morgan came in. Randy was like insistent on Morgan, and Morgan came in and he sat across there, and the first thing he reads, and I'm like, this is the guy. And then he says, I really don't like to work too much.
We got told, I think we got told by Joel or someone, like, then he disappeared after an audition. It's like, we don't know where Morgan is. It's like, he was just outside skateboarding around and just chilling around.
Well, I'll get to that in a second. Yes, this is the whole Randy Stone thing. And so I like that. He reminded me of my brother. I think they have the same birth date or something like that. And then James Morrison, when he came into audition, everybody read in that chair. Then Randy had this great office. I think it had been like Marilyn Monroe's dressing room on the Fox lot. And then it was Alan Alda's dressing room during MASH. Overstuffed chairs. It was great. And James Morrison, he came in and he sat over there. And so he's like, the only days, the tough days, easy days yesterday. And he's doing all that stuff. And like Jim and I are just like laughing because it was like, you've seen hundreds of people and one guy sat in the wrong chair. And if you know James now, it's even funnier. And I'm like, you got cast because you sat in the wrong chair. And which is not true, of course, because he's amazing. So from there you go, here's every character has two actors. You're down to two actors, and you take them over to the network, which at that time is in the Fox executive building, which is a historic building where Sanic, and it was a great building. And they come in and they read, and they mix them up with different people and blah blah blah. And everybody was automatic. Everybody was like Joel and I, Morris, Kristen, everybody, but they were unsure about Morgan. And so Morgan, what had attracted us was that he did a part in a show called China Beach, which was about Vietnam. And it was really ahead of its time. And he had a part on that, and he was just amazing. And so they were losing momentum for Morgan. And Randy Stone is like, we want to show you some tape from a scene in China Beach. And they didn't have a VHS machine there. So we're going down to the head of the network's office, and all these executives traipsing down this historic hallway, and it's, kind of ill-lit or whatever. And Randy Stone, who was the most, I don't think he ever played a sport in his life or whatever. He turned on me and like grabbed me in the hallway. It's like, you better give it for Morgan. If we get out of that room and Morgan's not playing the part, I'm like, hey man. So I went in there and I gave it for Morgan because I was afraid of Randy. He's going to beat me up. And so I gave a passionate thing, like that scene from China Beach is what this show is. We're not doing Star Trek, all respect, but we're doing a different show. And this actor can bring it. And so that was the level of, like, when he finished the X-Files pilot, David Duchovny's playing this part, and David's like, I'm a movie star, and Randy's like, no, he would not budge until Dave Duchovny played that part. And so every cast member, that's what's one excellent part about this show is the cast. And it was all Randy's passion demanding that every one of those characters were played by the actors that he wanted, and he was always right.
And also Shirley Walker's music. I mean, I think to me the show is also really Shirley.
Yeah.
That she I think Randy, Shirley, the CGI, and I think that just the chemistry of the crew, the writing of Glenn and Jim and the actors, I think all together, because they're so much in the fabric of the characters. I think it all worked in that way.
Yeah, that's being able to talk to members of this production. There are certain people who keep getting referred back to, like Randy Stone, like you've said, is a very pivotal part. And as someone who's viewing it, you don't always think about, the casting person or even the composer, but also like Thomas Wright has been brought up a bunch as like a director who kind of really kind of got the feel of the show. But I guess for us, the pilot episode is kind of like this unique little thing because you filmed it down here in Australia. And it looks Australian, has Australian actors, like the UN. The Secretary General of the UN is beloved actor Bill Hunter, who we all know and love down here. But I was just wondering if you both have some fun and or interesting stories about your time down here and doing the pilot.
I loved Australia. I think I was telling Glenn last night that the cast, we went to Brisbane, and I don't remember how we got there. And I think it was all of us, not James, but because James kind of came late. We weren't with James as much. And we did go to Brisbane, and I think I remember last night, I think we saw a Marc Chagall exhibit at the museum, and we did we did kangaroos, I think. I don't really, it was so long ago. But we all were getting to know each other. Yeah, the stories that we always tell are the ones that I remember. Like, we had met, we met, I think a lot of us met in the airport. Like we had a holdover, I think, on the way there in Auckland. And I think we had to hang out there. So we were like really just beginning to know each other, even on the plane. And they first put us in a hotel. And the hotel it was a nice hotel. There was nothing wrong with it, but we were going to be there for 2 months, and it was a pretty small hotel room, and there's no place for us to like make food or whatever. So, the cast was all calling each other, are we going to be in these hotels for the whole time? And I said, well, we'll go and we'll talk to the producers. And so we went and talked to the producers, and we get into the room, and the whole cast fades back, and it's like I got pushed forward. So I was listening to a little bit of Morgan's, being upset about Shane being honcho, but like and so it was just, and so I'm the lead actress, and already I'm like, listen, guys, the accommodations are not going to be good enough for me. And all of them are they were the ones they were like, we're not going to stand for this, and this is not right. And, and they're all in the doorway while I'm coming off as, the queen diva. So they're all on alert about me. The producers are like, this one is going to be a handful.
Well, she was an acquaintance of a problem actor on another show that Jim's like, Kristen's friends with this person. And we're like, oh God. Oh, yeah. So and then she comes in complaining about the apartment. Well, here we go.
So I had a target on my back that, the producers were like, we're going to have to keep an eye on her. She's going to be a problem.
Australia, I went to some, I don't know, with my kids were little, and I went to something, it was like kangaroos. And they go, whatever it is, don't feed the kangaroos standing up, or don't bend over because they'll come back and they'll eviscerate you and your stomach each will die. I'm like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
The kangaroos hang out with Winnie the Pooh. What are you talking about? And so then I'd be jogging and the kangaroos would come out at sun. I'm like, oh my God, kangaroos.
Ryan, do you want to tell your favorite story of how kangaroos are dicks?
Kangaroos are assholes. So one of my favorite things about kangaroos is...
I want to hear this. I'm excited.
If you see... So kangaroos like to stand in a body of water. They just like to stand in there to attract animals or people to come to them to aid them or attack them so that they can then grab them and drown them. And that's what kangaroos like to do as fun. They don't benefit from doing that. They just do that just because. So yeah, kangaroos, we have a lot of cute little creatures who are mean, actually, and you don't want to be near them, including kangaroos. They're not the friendliest. They're cool to look at. But yeah,
I think we're scouting and we're on a golf course and like the location guys are like, oh, this thing, and like laughing, and they just pulled out the biggest snake I've ever seen. And it's like, and it was like, oh, there's a snake. I'm like, yeah, keep it over there. Keep it away from me. And then the other most Australian thing that happened to us, like we're scouting, we're trying to find Mars, which ended up being down in Newcastle. Oh. Sand down there. But we're going to go scout the outback. And we get into this little plane, which, a little plane, and it's crowded. There's, I don't know, probably 5 or 6, but it seems like a dozen, and it's not going off, and it's like, and you get that diesel smell, and you're packed, and it's hot, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna barf, and then the plane's not taking off, and then some guy gets up onto the wing of the plane with a hammer, opens up a door, and is going bang, 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 and Jim Walker and I are going, this is the most Australia thing I've ever seen. Why are we in this plane? So when this plane starts to crash, I'm gonna go, why didn't we get out when the guy was hammering on the wing?
I was going to ask, like, when doing the production element of space in Australia, what was like the difference of attitude compared to when you did have to transition back to the US? Because there are, like, being here, we kind of know the stuff, but even like Farscape was a show that was shot down here, and they would always talk about a bit like, oh, the kind of more larrikin, maverick, kind of chilled attitude of Australian production. But what was it like on your end?
I just want to add one thing, which was interesting because there weren't a lot of productions there. In fact, the Warner Brothers...
Sahara.
Is that what it was?
There was a...
Now it's Village Roadshow Studios now.
Yeah.
And that's where we shot. And, a lot of the crew, a lot of the grips and stuff, they would say like, yeah, I came from the bush. Like I grew up in the bush, because they were people who were used to doing like, labor jobs. And so, pushing camera equipment around was like nothing to them, and they had these really thick accents, and they would tell me stories of working in the bush. And it was so, I had never been to Australia, and just seemed so exotic. And and of course, the people were so incredibly nice. But also interesting was that I don't know if it's different now. At that time, they just really weren't impressed by actors. It just wasn't. That wasn't a thing.
That's still true.
That hasn't changed.
It just wasn't like.
It's just like, you think you're special.
Yeah, yeah. That was not. No.
They would go like, we had to go from the Gold Coast down to Newcastle.
Yeah.
And like we're getting in a plane, and Jim and I are like, "Where's the cast?" And they go, "Oh, they made them take the bus."
Yeah.
I'm like, what? Oh hell, we're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah, and like I said, when we got there, it was like not an easy shoot, and they didn't care. They were like, they're gonna stay in this hotel, they're gonna take the bus. It just wasn't.
All the crew had to drive their own vehicles and their own trucks.
Yeah,
that was. It was complete opposite.
It was in a weird way. It was a good way to start because, to be the lead of a series all of a sudden out of nowhere. And I had been in a TV series before, but nothing, to this degree. This was just such an epic thing. And there were so many opportunities to be unhappy because it was so physical and so hard. And we all had to be in shape and work out and, all that stuff. And there was an advantage to the crew just being like, you're really not that important to us. Like, come in, get your makeup done, get out and do your job. And it was just very Australian. And so in a weird way, it was good to start that way.
It's still kind of like that. Like I've been involved in some productions and theater stuff, and I can tell you, even someone as acclaimed as Jeffrey Rush will still get the cold shoulder from just average, Aussie people or production people. It's like, I don't give a shit. Like, good for you, Jeff. Yeah, whatever. But Rachel, you actually have a kind of a question, kind of going off.
Well, I want to just say one last thing. Like, we would have shot there. The problem was in 1995 or 6. We were going to CGI and the internet. And you were a day away, and it was just the logistics at that time made it difficult. And so we went back home. Although we had a hammerhead. This is the other thing. We had a hammerhead. It was being shipped back on a boat. It was being in plastic. And when the producers there told us that, like, the police caught Russian guys trying to see what this plane was.
Yeah. I mean, if you can imagine, we had to, like, I would fax my parents. Isn't that crazy? In order to communicate, because we were on such a different time. So any friends or family that I wanted to talk to, we had a fax machine at the apartments we stayed in downstairs, and I could give them to, that's another funny story, but I won't tell the
We're hijacking their
I know. I won't tell the tiny story.
But, I mean, you were at the precipice around that time and a bit onwards. Hollywood would use Australia for a lot of productions, like The Matrix. Some of that was filmed down here. Like, I remember as a young kid, my dad could have been the body stand-in for Hugo Weaving because he had the same proportions in the second film where they fought a million Hugo Weavings. But and
then also, like, now that time difference is sort of seen as an asset because now they have a lot of CGI artists working out of Australia because then they can work through the night and then time zone. LA can pick up where...
What we know, Rachel, is the Hollywood system is super nice to the special effects people and treat them with grace and dignity and respect and don't crunch them into the inch of their life. I'm kidding, of course. But Rachel, you actually have a question for Kristen there.
Yeah. For Shane, you were having to portray that fresh-faced Marine. So is there anything that you did to better understand that military mindset to authentically portray the character?
We had military advisors on set all the time. So they were there to keep it authentic. We were Glenn and I talked about this a little bit last night, and the hard part about Shane is that she had to be a lot of different things. The network really pressed all of us to be this, like, attractive group of Marines. So, in fact, Tom and I, we're still close friends with Tom Wright, and we'll go to dinner, and I will remind him that he used to call me the Maybelline Marine. And because it used to drive him crazy that I was in hair and makeup to play a Marine. But, that was part of what I was charged to do. So, you were splitting the difference between, being an authentic Marine. And I, of course, worked out pretty much every day and kept myself in physical shape. I could do, full push-ups the whole entire time, that we filmed. And, I wasn't, there were certain things that I'm not always incredibly graceful, and Lanai used to really make fun of me. So when I had to do some of that honcho stuff, it was a little bit, I was a little laughed at by the other cast members. So, we really tried to, we all tried to keep it as authentic as possible. And I think that was really important to all of us. And so, we had to make sure that we had those military turns right. And especially a lot of that happened in Australia. where we had time and we had to do training and stuff like that. So a lot of that happened there. And then, of course, as you're getting into the show and it becomes so much more about the characters, some of that military stuff just, I think, sort of became less important until you were out doing stuff. I always say that Sugar Dirt is one of my favorite episodes because it was such a big episode, and it was all the cast interacting, and it was sort of at this pivotal moment in the series where it was about becoming a family in a way, like solidifying that idea. And I loved the physicality of that episode. There was a lot of running. And so, I think the physical aspects for me and, doing a lot of the stunts and all of that, I think, so there was a lot involved. It wasn't just the military piece. It was physical, emotional. Certainly the military part was a big part of it. And, and of course you had Tucker there who had been in the military.
So did Tom Wright.
And Tom Wright.
Full tours.
Right.
And Wendell Colby.
Yeah. So we had a lot of people on set who were not going to let you get away with just
winging it.
Being a chick. You had to show up.
But also, I know Tucker talked about this with us a bit, but like with someone like Tucker and Thomas, right? Like they also understand that this is entertainment in a way. Like there's a certain degree of like you have to, not like you have to kind of mold things. And I just want to circle back. This was just interesting when you were talking about if you felt right for the part when initially going for it, you felt like Shane was like, young in that way. It's funny as a viewer to me. One of the things I think about with Shane as a character is that she has such an old soul in comparison to everyone else, because she's suffered so much in her past, and yet she still has like this kind of steadiness to her throughout the series. It's one of the things that I really love about the character, kind of that dichotomy of like you as like this fresh-faced, actress who's playing this Marine, but also like the character herself has kind of like I said, this old soul feel to her.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's probably just because she was really tough. She was just a very, very tough person. Even though, I had to carry a lot of the emotional weight because I was the girl. So I cried probably every episode. I can't even think of that many episodes where I didn't at some point cry. Even though Shane was so tough, she was also sort of, the person who expressed emotional pain probably the most. So there was a lot of that. But to be honest, and it's not just because Glenn is sitting there, when it's on the page, Glenn and I would get into discussions about would she do that, would she say that, and
she's always right.
And we would have different debates about that. But I think Glenn is Shane more than he's any of the other characters. I mean, I know that some of the other casts feel differently, but Shane is from San Diego, and even though Glenn was born in Syracuse, he grew up in San Diego, and he has this kind of quiet, maybe tough exterior, but on the inside, he's very, very soft.
I feel we're talking about Shane. Shirley Walker taught me the most, besides Kristen. It's like any show that's pretty good, the writer and the actor are having a dialogue, and sometimes it's said and sometimes it's not. And you can look at the dailies, or you can go in the editing and learn a lot. And so the characters hopefully grow as you go. But, when we did Dark Side of the Sun, and Shirley came back with her score, and it's I think it's a round do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. It's like same thing. And just taught me that Shane Vansen was just in this loop. of a need for revenge, that her family had been massacred, and she thought that maybe somehow vengeance would ease that pain, but it won't. And so I learned that from Shirley Walker. I really didn't see that at all. And oddly, that score she rearranged for 4 string instruments when we got married. Kristen came down. I think Shirley's conducting them. And but Shirley Walker would really teach Jim and I a lot about character and what was going on with the show that you never understood.
Yeah. And I think as an actor, you do your performance and you do your best. But when you have someone like Shirley Walker, who's scoring what you're doing, it changes it really lifts up so much of those performances. And, if you go back and watch again, just where that score comes in and how she just is so emotionally in tune with those characters.
I love her theme for McQueen.
Yeah.
It's just like man, I'm going to cry. Fanfare to do. It's a call to war for a warrior that can't answer it anymore. And so that fanfare just kind of goes down. And it's just like, it's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
People that are not with us anymore.
Yeah.
We miss. And she was extraordinary.
She really was.
It was one of the standouts of the show. It's easy to take
credit, but you can take credit for it, but there's a lot of people and a lot of things that go into any of those performances. And so it is you and you do your best, but to have someone like Shirley Walker putting music under what you're doing, it just changes it. It just is so much better.
We were shooting at the university, and I don't remember what it was, but you guys might remember. It's the end of the pilot when they all graduate. There's a university there, and we're shooting at night. And I had been listening to all these composers, and I'm like, I want an orchestra. It's a war movie. It's got to be Patton. And, you get all these synthesized stuff. And it was, and it was Glen Campbell, who was the one of the visual effects artists at Area 51. He was a big soundtrack aficionado. And he walked up to me while we're shooting out of nowhere, and he had a little Walkman, and he's like, "What about this?" And he put him on and he hit play, and I was like, "Yeah, this person." And I remember that. Like, I think that night, Randy won the Academy Award.
Oh,
the Academy Awards were on, and everybody were filming, going, "Did he win? Did he win?"
Yeah, the music for us is a definite standout, and a thing I'll just mention now, and then I'll pass it over to Rachel, is a compliment we had a lot was with stuff like the music and the direction, there became a lot more of a confidence within the series to let those production sides tell the story rather than dialogue, because in the early days, it was like, tell us, but then it very much became show us. And when you get to something like Shane's theme, even I sitting at home have that feeling. Like, I always described it as, it reminds me of like a dog chasing its tail, that kind of like spinning out of control type thing, but it's also locked in at the same time. Like this. It's
like, if I can just get it, and it's always going to be that little bit further away.
Yeah. But Rachel, what have you got for us now?
Yeah.
But that's so observant of you guys. That's really, I mean, we've done, we haven't done a lot of interviews about space, but I never really heard anybody tune into that in that way. That's so smart.
Yeah, well, it was a praise that we kept on giving the show was it's greater than the sum of its parts. And all of these things are working together to make a really beautiful piece. And another comment that we kept on making was clearly the writers are military history nerds.
Yeah. We were walking into say to Rachel, it's a sci-fi show. There's going to be sci-fi nerd stuff. And then it's like, no. We're going to learn about World War II details and this way.
And I was hoping to hear a little bit more. You mentioned that there was a writing class that really informed that style of writing and your Glen's history with being a military history nerd, if you are in fact one.
I don't know. A bit. I really like every genre of film, especially musical. And, there was just one of the books in that fiction of war class that Jim and I had in college was All Quiet on the Western Front, which, like, the book is just fantastic. And the new film is extraordinary. Man, and so all the themes that we had been introduced to through Catch-22, Naked and the Dead, and Red Badge of Courage. I think we flat out lifted a thing from Red Badge of Courage, and or it could be All Quiet on the Western Front. Who Monitors the Birds is that he sees that this enemy is actually has a family or whatever, and so there was that, and then just going to Peter Roth, going, we want to do World War II in space, and then we start looking at
12 o'clock high.
12 o'clock high, and all that stuff, even the jingoistic stuff like Sans v. Iwo Jima, and it's just like we just took it all in. And but then we say to like sugar dirt, this might have been like Guadalcanal, and instead of island hopping, it's planet hopping. And what the Americans had left a bunch of Americans behind, like, we'll come back to get you. Like, just do that. We tell the other writers, just do that, or the pilot is the Battle of Britain, and things like that. And you would just kind of look it up and find like there's pretty dramatic situation. I mean, we were just like, the thing about it that we don't have on our show, that those war shows, you didn't know how it was going to end. We just saw Casablanca. And you just like think about people watching that, any of those war movies I mentioned, and the war wasn't over. To be watching that movie in 1940s would have been such anxiety to not know how it was going to end. However, when I was in Brisbane, I tracked down MacArthur's headquarters, and it was a Doc Barton shoe store. And then above it, I think was like an equivalent of like a Planned Parenthood type thing. And I was up there, and there was all these people looking at me like, how'd you get in here? And I'm like, is this where MacArthur was? And they're like, get out. Weirdo. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just an interesting flavor because, this is lumped in as like a big sci-fi, like you're a sci-fi show fan, but it's very much more of a military war show, right. And the sci-fi kind of aids that. And so when we were watching through it, it would be like, here's whole scenes dedicated to talking about like these little intricacies of military history, which is, again, something unique still to this. Like even other sci-fi war shows don't go into that level of it. Like I love Babylon 5, it will have its moments, or Battlestar Galactica, but like this show like really was like, no, we're a war like this is a military war show, and the sci-fi comes second to that. And that was just like one of those things of like being familiar with some of your other writing with stuff like X-Files and the Final Destination stuff. It just does kind of stand out to me. Like that kind of focus is a little different to the other things that you've done. And we were just curious.
Thanks. I mean, it's easy to knock executives. It's real easy to knock executives, but we had a really good group of executives. Bob Greenblatt had went on to run NBC, and Dana Walden is going to run all of Disney in a couple of years. But the one thing in 1996, prior to Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, we would constantly get knock off the World War II shit. Why are you doing that? It is uncool. Like, knock off the World War II stuff. And probably, considering who ultimately is running the network at the time, that might have what did us in. Because it was just like, and then we were done, and then it was World War II all the time after Private Ryan and Band of Brothers up until, who knows, mid 80s or 90s or whatever. So, that was, Kristen and I have been to Normandy, and, it's like a hell of a thing that our grandparents did for us and stuff. And so why not talk about it?
Yeah. We've already kind of touched on it a bit, but what was the general relationship like between you, the writers, and the cast? Like, were you as cast members, say, Kristen, feel comfortable to come up and talk to people? And I guess it's kind of altered too because you two were forming a romantic relationship during the show, right? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different.
Yeah.
Am I blushing?
You know, it was interesting. Glenn, the where we ended up shooting in Los Angeles were these converted warehouses. And so they built planets and the ISSCB and all of that were in the main studio portion. And our dressing rooms were on the same floor. But Glenn and Jim had their offices upstairs, and they could like literally look over onto the stages. And they had, I think they had an interesting relationship with us at first. When there were times in which there were any kind of tensions on the set, or especially at first when we were first gelling, and there was questions about who was getting what and what lines there were and who was honcho or who was and Glenn and Jim brought us all into the office. I'm sure someone's told you this story. And they sat us down, and they said, there's a Chig bullet pointing at each and every single one of you. And so nobody's job here is safe. So you better make sure that you work hard, you show up on time, and you do your best, and no bullshit.
Well, they started getting into like, oh, this is Rodney's episode. Oh, this is Kristen's episode. And you go like, every episode is everybody's episode.
Yeah.
And then they knocked it off. And
so and even though they're like very lovely people, especially when the two of them are together, I'm sure this was spoken about during the auditions, is that it was intimidating because they're both very quiet, sort of taciturn, stone-faced people. When you don't know them, it's a little intimidating. So they had this kind of mystique about them, and you didn't know what they were writing. They didn't really tell you what was coming up. They were hard to get to know. Glenn and I had taken a walk in Australia together. We're both big walkers. And I didn't know that about him. And I spent a lot of time in Australia when I wasn't working, just walking. And when we were on location in Newcastle, we went on a walk, and we sort of became friends at that time. And our friendship sort of formed, and we just ended up having a lot in common. We liked similar music, and we both liked to walk. And so there was this sort of really this professional mystique that they had. But, Glenn and I are just oddly just very well suited to one another. We just always got on really. We didn't get on at first. Like I said, they were wary of me, and they thought I was going to be some strange diva. But I think they were just really afraid of, everything that they liked about Shane Vansen. I think Shane Vansen is an intimidating character. So I think it was probably, responding to some of that. But so yeah, I think everyone really, really liked Glenn and Jim and wanted to be around them and hang out with them and be friends with them. And I felt really lucky that Glenn and I had that connection and that friendship that ended up developing into, a lifelong partnership. But
Joel,
they're just very different people. I mean, Glenn's a really extraordinary person. I'd never met anybody quite like him before. So I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe space was just some funny, blip in our destiny, that it was just meant to be that we met, and met all of the cast, really. I mean, we're still close. And James and Riyadh are, like family to us. And we consider them all family. If any one of them ever called, and wanted to come and hang out or needed anything,
Yeah,
we
it's
would
weird.
drop
It's
everything for them. I mean, we still really love all of them.
Both of us have been on a lot of shows, and in this business is like, I love you, man. I love you. Let's be forever. And then you're gone and you never see him again. You don't care. But like Space is one show where everybody's like close. I try to use, I haven't been able to cast Joel because he's always
Or
working.
Lanai.
Or Lanai. I don't know. We see Lanai up here every once in a while, but
yeah, we don't see them all the time, but I think they always, to us, are just really important people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an exceptional thing because it's a one season canceled show, and you like you were saying, you worked on a lot of shows, you don't see this type of relationship. But even like put it in that context of like, I don't imagine like a lot of one season shows that got canceled get this type of bond between everyone as well. Like when we were getting ready to talk to Tucker, him and James went golfing, like a week or two earlier. It's like, oh, that's cute, like.
But I think that kind of thing is really a testament to really strong relationships and strong bonds, is when you can just meet up with somebody after maybe not talking or not seeing them for ages, and you just pick up because you're like, I get you, you get me, we're on the same team. Let's enjoy being with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like them all as people.
Yeah.
And I feel like we shared something that was really special. And I care for them all very much, even though I don't see them or talk to them. If any of them ever called or was around, or, I would drop everything to.
I was working on Twilight Zone in Vancouver, and Joel's like, I'm in town. I don't know. He has a one-man play about a man who sort of fought being interned in camps, Japanese camps that the Americans did at the war. And he's like phenomenal, and then we went after and had a drink, and it was just great to see him.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we don't see Rodney as much anymore, but he
lives in Atlanta, but I cast him in a show I did in Atlanta, and he did great.
Yeah, and Rodney was in my theater company that I was the artistic director of, and he did some work there. So he's extraordinary. And Morgan, I always say I'm going to write something for Morgan one day. I just think he's so great, and what a great face.
Well, that was when the show was over, and Jim Wong and I went back to X-Files. We were going back for 4 episodes, and I went to Chris Carter, and I'm like, look at this cast is amazing. They got short shrift from Fox. I'm writing, all of them are in it. I'm writing them. Each episode I write, the intent is to show off one of these members from Space Above and Beyond. And Chris Carter's like, okay, fine.
Sure.
So,
and you cracked your knuckles and said, okay, I'm going to murder Tucker Smallwood real good in my X-Files episode.
Yeah, well, he's remembered for it. But he did this episode of Millennium. He was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He was really great.
That's one of my
favorites.
favorites.
Never bad. Tucker's always great.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's so good.
He's one of our favorites. Now, Rachel, you had a quite interesting journey with Shane on our podcast, and I don't know if either of you have listened to any of it, but Rachel had quite a turbulent time at the beginning. So how about you walk us through a bit?
Oh no, you had a hard time with Shane.
These are just water. We're not preparing your question.
Yeah, maybe we better get something. Beer. Maybe I better get something a little stronger before I get into Rachel's opinions of Shane. Oh no,
I had trouble with Shane because of the baggage that I brought to the show, because I was afraid that she was just going to be manipulated, stock standard. Like, female characters in sci-fi are often very bland or just malleable.
The romantic partner, that type of thing.
Like, they're just the chick and she's there. But Shane's identity...
But that's what most women get to play.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I played when I wasn't Shane. I did a lot of that. I made a living playing the girlfriend or the girl who doesn't matter. Or even, I avoided being on some sci-fi shows because of that. Yeah.
And I know too, Rachel, you were saying in our discussions that also that the kind of reverse of like, to make a female character strong, they basically write them like a man.
Yeah,
was also a thing you just don't like as well. It kind of annoys you.
Because it's just like, oh God, you're just writing a man with boobs. I'm over it.
Right.
But Shane's identity as a woman isn't stripped back or removed to make her a commanding presence within the 58th. Which was a real surprise for me, and it delighted me no end, especially when she got to be Huncho. There was something so satisfying about that. But I would appreciate hearing about that more from your perspective, Kristen.
It was, Glenn and I talk about it a lot now, and now it's a lot of credit for that stuff is given to other actresses on other television shows. But Glenn Morgan really insisted that he was going to have a strong female character. And I think, Shane was really one of the first that, had a balance. The Battlestar Galactica stuff and all that came after. And, I really maintained that, there's this idea, and I think that as women, we struggle with this, and this is a theme that I have, and, writing that I've done and things that I talk about with other women. And, in order to trust a woman, especially, you have to put her in a category. That this idea that a woman can't be a lot of different things. And when you look at her, you need to know who she is by looking at her. Whereas men, we don't have that quite as much. Men can be a lot layered. Oh, he looks like a rogue, but he's got a heart of gold. We allow for that a lot more. But if a woman wears makeup and holds an M590, well, what kind of weirdo is she? And so I think that idea that you can only be one kind of person, and that we need to know who someone is immediately by looking at them, I think is tough, especially for women. And we have requirements of all the things that we want to be. So I feel like I wanted to make sure that Shane was taken seriously as a whole person, a whole complicated, layered person. And I put effort into that, and I defended it. And some people didn't like it. I got letters saying, "Why is her hair long?" Or
Sorry, Jim Wong and I got a letter one time, handwritten, like the Zodiac killer or whatever. And like, because you write strong women, it's obvious you're homosexuals. Like that's somebody's life is so shitty that they have to.
Well, and that they qualify being homosexual as a bad.
No, that's not my point.
I just
that's
find
my
that
point. Like,
offensive,
what's wrong with you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, Glenn and Jim carved out a great character in Shane. I think especially Glenn was particularly partial to Shane. So I got to do and say and be a lot of things that were written by a guy, but he was sensitive to the fact that I wanted to have it be through the vessel. We only are who we are, and we all come, you came to Shane with all of your stuff about it, and I came to Shane with all of my stuff about it. And so, we all come to addressing women with our own stuff about who a woman has been in the past and what are the expectations there. So I think it's a constantly growing conversation. And I like things that um, are not always what you expect, or I like that she was really tough, but she cared about certain things about herself, or um, I don't know. She was a really complicated person. She was a really dark, sad, tough, complicated, broken lady.
Yeah, she was. And I really,
Lady Marine.
yeah, I really appreciated that Shane really got to have like and or slashes in her character. Like she's a marine and she's a woman and she's a pool player and she's vulnerable and she's traumatized.
She's a sister and and a daughter as well, and yeah, there was a lot
she
of that.
She gets to be all of those things. And my question was going to be for Glenn, was that a deliberate choice to make Shane a really strong female character, or was it just sort of a byproduct of just trying to make good characters and well-defined characters?
Well, you always want a good and well-defined. It's not that long ago. What you said is exactly right. Is like there's this, we knew that there was a certain other science fiction show that, like, the wardrobe, the women were all enhanced to look like they had D cups.
Cat suits. They loved wearing cat suits.
Right. Yeah. Why would you do that? And, and then my mom was, a very strong woman in the United States in the 50s and 60s when that was coming, and she was kind of bullied, and that didn't make sense to me. And then you say that the only thing that got left out was like she was a surrogate mother, and that's what, like, Kristen, like, you're going to make Shane Vansen the captain to make a statement. But it was also clear that the way those actors when they came on set or whatever, it was always like Kristen was a surrogate mom. She's very nurturing, and she's like, you just like sit there and you watch that dynamic and you put it on paper.
In the pilot, even, you have West and Cooper just dick measuring against each other, and then Shane's in the middle actually calling the shots of how things should be done. And like, as a viewer, I remember Rachel was talking about, like, you're like, I kind of hope that they actually make that the thing going forward, like Shane's actually the one that actually calls the shots instead of West or Cooper, because that's what you traditionally get. I know for my mother, she's so iffy on sci-fi, and she always brings up Space 1999 as her favorite because a woman got to wear pants in that one. That's what she says. She's like, I love Space 1999 because there was a strong woman who was a scientist who got to wear pants for a change, literally. And I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of how it was for a long time. But I guess I just want to know, Glenn, what was the average writing process like on Space? Like, what was it kind of for you? And I know that you and Jim are like a writing team, but like, what does that actually look like in practice?
That was a little different. Usually Jim and I would go, well, here's an idea. What if, say you just wanted to do a character like Ray Butts or something. And like, because, we really got along with Lee Ermey, was such an interesting man. And like, maybe we could bring him back. Maybe that drill instructor could be this. And it didn't work out. And so then you just sit down with Jim Wong in a room, and you got a board and you have index cards, and you're like, oh, here's this and here's that, and this happens, and you just end up doing the whole thing. And then he takes some and writes it, I take some and write it. And, in that case, you had, that show in the X-Files, there wasn't, the way they talk about writers' rooms now. And so you would just talk with individual writers and go, look, I want you to do an episode of like Guadalcanal, or I want you to do this, and, bring in that. And, and then Jim and I would touch it up. But Space became so difficult that really what ended up happening was Jim would do a lot of production. He would do a lot of editing, and then I would just write them. And a lot of times I didn't have the ability to sit down and outline them. You would just like go, and it was based off of what, the relationships we had with the cast. All that stuff, the cast, that's how they are. There's little things like the enemy when all that, you're just like, what are you afraid of? And then I started thinking about Morgan, and they go, well, it should be like this. You go, okay. It was just like, it was a good conversation between, and then one time, then the network's like, oh, we need an episode where Kristen wears a big red Michelle Pfeiffer dress because the Baker, what was that? The Fabulous Baker Boy brothers?
Yeah.
With Jeff Bridges and his brother, right? And so then we go and do the
R&R. Well, also, Lanai and I were always like, are we going to get to wear normal clothes ever? Yeah. I mean, we were always had to wear, it was like, well, should we wear the black tank top or the gray tank top or the white t-shirt under our flight suit, and can we tie it around? Can we tie because that's how we walked around. We would pull the flight suit down and tie it around our waist.
Yeah, I mean, It was a great look. It was a great look for this series that had a very specific aesthetic to it. One of the things that we really adored and came in love, became infatuated with during our watch through of the show is, we're watching it and we know it's a 1-season thing and it's got cancelled, and there's always that thing of if there could have been more. But with a lot of first season shows, especially sci-fi contemporaries, there's always a struggle within the first season. You always see there's these big mistakes or these things that the writing isn't really grabbing onto that's clearly there. And then in the second season, they get there. But one of the things that we really loved was how adaptive the show was with these things. Oh, we're going to keep killing off random members of the 58th who we don't know at all and try to milk it. But then it was oh, we'll give Winslow as a character, and then we have her for several episodes or stuff like that. And I was just curious on your part, Glenn, of what was that journey and process like to kind of find the voice of the show and to be able to pivot and to adapt and to kind of use the things that were working, because it was really fast for us. By the midway point, it's wow, they're kind of countering found their feet, but also countering a lot of the criticisms we would have of the show early on. Oh, I wish they would do this, or I wish they did that. And then eventually, you guys did it. So what was that kind of like for you?
It's hard to remember. We had there was an executive, Ken Horton, who went on later to run Chris Carter's company, and he was very what we did on Dallas was that if an audience didn't like a character, we'd have the other characters talk about why they like them. And so I think it's the River of Stars. She gives him the socks and he goes off and he's still hearing on the radio or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That they're someone's explaining about Morgan. And that was all Ken Horton. And so he had and everybody that was helping us out had a history of guiding writers and great TV shows, Peter Roth and Ken Horton and all that. And then after that, it was just we had a guide of a great history of war films. We had a guide of what really happened during the war. And we had a cast that dictated oh, this would be great. Who Monitors the Birds? Rodney was great with dialogue, but that's a visual guy. And how do we just do that? And so, that all those things just come about. And other times, on shows, that stuff doesn't come about.
Yeah, it's a level of kind of kill your darlings as well, or you have to adjust to what is happening. We talked to Morgan about it, but West definitely takes a bit of a step back and it becomes more of an overt ensemble piece. And for us, that was to the benefit of the show, but was that kind of change up for you as a writer difficult, or was that something that you felt now we're really cooking with what we need to do?
No, my memory is a little frustrated because I would really want my love's been taken away. I don't know if that might have been a Western thing, from the Searchers, our family's been kidnapped, and I really wanted that to have an emotional power, but I don't know if we were doing it wrong. were in the 90s. Just people were like, that's kind of corny. And so we just kind of put it into a different thing. And then we found her before things were over and sent her home, and we're done with it.
Yeah.
That was probably, it was a mistake or it wasn't done right, but I wanted more out of that. And it wasn't working. So we just kind of
mixed it. Well, one of the things I was just curious of, we were always wondering this on our podcast, is for West, there felt like there was like that kind of love and sympathy from the other writers, but also like you would put in things for West that were like very like prickish. Like he doesn't like in vitros for a good period of the show. Like he has this kind of viewpoint on them, and like he would do arrogant things for what you were just saying. Like, oh, I'll just steal a hammerhead and fly off, and fuck you guys, I'm just going to get my girlfriend.
So in 1995, the San Francisco 49ers beat my beloved San Diego Chargers in the Super Bowl. And I was like, I must have payback. So I hexed them. And I gave the line to Morgan. I think he says, the Niners suck. They haven't won the Super Bowl in 69 years. Morgan had no idea what that line meant, but he loved that it was annoying somebody, and so you could give that stuff to him. And so the 49ers in the Super Bowl this year, and I had no doubt that they were losing.
Glen Sports hex, or
it's a 30 some odd year hex. I'm very proud of it.
It was very busy because I was looking at YouTube. People have uploaded the show to YouTube, and one of the comments was like from a little bit ago, being like, "Oh, we're actually getting up to that point for this. Let's see how they go with this prediction." So, Rachel, I guess you got one of the big questions to ask for us next.
Yeah. These have been pretty big questions.
Well, they're all, well, it's a show that I feel like I haven't got to hear people discuss, including you guys. So it's like, it feels like all of them are big questions in a way, because it's like, as a viewer of the show, I'm like, oh, I would love to know this. And then you look it up and it's like, only little bits and bobs are online. So it's like, well, let's ask them. So what have we got, Rach?
My question just is simply, what was your favorite episode of the show and why?
Am I supposed to answer that?
Yeah, that's for both of you.
I like a lot. I like them all. Can you guys hear that noise? There's someone doing something loud outside.
Can't hear it from Aaron.
Okay, good. Like I said, I love Sugar Dirt. It's one of my favorite episodes. Tom Wright directed it. I think just as an episode, a standalone episode, I think it holds up. One of the best. I love Who Monitors the Birds. I think that's so well done. I'm partial to the Shane episode, the strong, the kind of more biographical Shane episodes, Never No More and Dark Side, because they gave me an opportunity to explore her as a character in a different way. But I think just in watching them, I love the two-parter of Never No More and Angriest Angel. I think that really also works really well. But there's so many good ones, but I think just like, as if I were to pick one episode that I feel like really shows off what everybody can do and what the show was capable of, I think Sugar Dirt stands out as one of my favorite. And I do like the Christmas episode a lot. Glenn watches that sometimes at Christmas because he loves the music. And Joel's opening, he narrates it so beautifully. And I like that show a lot too. There's so many, but I think Sugar Dirt shows off the show the best.
What about you, Glenn?
We were all lit on fire during that show, but
oh yeah, we've heard the horror stories.
Yeah.
Who Monitors Birds? I'm most proud of. Dark Side of the Sun, because that's a personal thing. It kicked off a creative partnership that's still ongoing. And The Angriest Angel is very personal to me. I didn't know it when I was writing it. And then like sometime after I was like, oh geez, about my divorce is like really embarrassing. That was like so laid out there. But also James Morrison is phenomenal. I could watch him going. He's great.
Yeah, he is great.
Oh, he's a favorite of ours, a fan favorite character and performance from him as well. And that was Rachel's. Rachel loved the Angerous Angel as an episode. I love Stay with the Dead. I'm a big West,
I love that.
I'm a big West head.
Yeah.
Well,
I love Stay with the Dead. He's so good in that. And he's also really good in Toy Soldiers. He's great in that. Great in that.
And Dear Earth was the one that made Rachel a bit teary-eyed because of West at the end, because Rachel was very much not a West fan. And then it's like, oh, you know what? I actually feel bad for this guy. And that's an episode that's kind of fun as well. Like you get the strawberry speech and you get you being all upset about your sister naming the kid and all of that. And
that was a real thing. My sister was pregnant with my nephew at the time. And she was going to take, I always wanted to name my daughter Lily. And she was like, if it's a girl, it's going to be Lily. And I was complaining to Glenn. I was like, why is she taking that name? She knows that I ended up not naming my daughter Lily anyway. But at the time I was.
And it's just, who monitors the birds? Kristen's part. When I was in Australia, I was reading William Manchester's, it was his memoir, Being in the War, and I'm totally blanking on it.
I know. I'm sorry. I know it too.
It's extraordinary, and he was in a battle, and it was like horrifying, and he's near death, and he crosses this crater, sees a ghost type of apparition of a woman dressed like a Connecticut schoolgirl, that causes him to become aroused, and all hell's breaking loose. Friends are dead right there. And he called that the horror of death. And I was like, oh man, what? Oh man. And I'm like, well, I think I'm just going to rip him off. But then in looking at it, this is a phenomena that's gone on from day one. And so like, that'd be interesting. So Kristen can be the horror of death to Rodney, which with Cooper seemed like an interesting dynamic, what was going on there. And the only character to have lines is Dale Dye, who was another very famous technical advisor. He was in Saving Private Ryan. And the one time he came up to Kristen when she was all in makeup and everything, and he looked at her, and you're worried, like, I hope we're getting this right, so we're treating these veterans properly. And he said to her, I saw you in Vietnam. So that episode had Goodbye Darkness?
No.
Anyway, look, it was a great book.
That episode is probably the one that the show is very much remembered for, because it is so
distinct.
It's such a swing of confidence too. Like, how many first seasons do you see just go for the fences like that? Like, even still to this day, it's kind of like one of those ones where it's like, oh, we're doing this. Like, we're gonna have a reduced amount of dialogue, and that's like one of the things I appreciated about the show too is. There was just so many episodes and moments where there was I guess I would describe it as a fuck it, let's do it type attitude. Like, fuck it, it's my show. I'm gonna try and do this. And that's definitely one of those like crowning jewels of the show where it's just like, here it is. And when you describe it to someone, it's a great pitch as well. It's like, oh, I would want to watch that. That sounds interesting.
Thanks. I mean, Jim and I take a pride in our responsibility of being physically responsible.
Fiscally,
right. And so I was at a hockey game with Ken Horton, and I was like, we're going to do this episode, and there's not a lot of dialogue. I just lied to him. He's like, how much? I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. And they just let us do it. And then when we were all done, the head of production called us in, and he's like, never do that again. I'm like, okay, fair enough.
And then years later, Buffy will crack its nails and do a silent episode, and it's the highest rated episode of that show too. It's just
Kristen did it on X-Files, and we did it on Millennium. Like, I just love it. And she did a great job. She wrote this episode with the robots and everything.
Oh yeah. And I guess a general kind of question is, we kind of talked about the episode, but, as an actress who got to perform in it and as a writer who got to write it, is there like a moment, a line, a detail, something special to you that kind of best sums up the series? Like kind of just best reflects it for you?
You go first.
It's again, I'm a thief. It was influence of all things, a Counting Crows song. And it was like, what are the lyrics like? I want to believe in someone because I don't believe in anything. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And so when they say to each other, I believe in you, that's, I think what we all want in life is somebody to go, I'm with whatever crazy shit you're doing. I'm behind you and I believe in you. And that to me is what the show is about.
I can't top that. I can't top that. Yeah. I mean, I would have to go back and think about it. But I mean, yeah, I would say that is definitely the show. I mean, that is the show. All those characters, I think it's at different points, say it to each other in one way or another. So for sure.
It's got that real found family quality to it, where the characters don't all quite get on, and then by the end they're willing to sacrifice themselves for each other's benefits, and it's just a heartstring pull. I'm surprised you didn't say Coolio. Definitely the heart of the show for me. My favorite.
May he rest in peace.
Yes.
No, but, I think Howard Grigsby, a producer. I'm in the editing room and they're shooting that, and Howard Grigsby was like this taller, proper English guy, and he's like, I beg your pardon. Our guest star says that he would like to leave now. I'm like, what did he not shoot? What scenes do we got? And he's like, well, scene 6 and scene 10. I'm like, let him go. He can go. I'm like, okay.
So there was supposed to be more Coolio.
There was supposed to be more Coolio. He was a good guy. He was all right. Yeah. But his limo pulled up. He had just won the Grammy, and the limo opens up and just like smoke pours out of it.
Because that's the most, that's the 90s in this show. Like, he's full Coolio. Like, he's got the full look of Coolio. It's like, and the advertisements.
I was worried that when Jim Wong and Coolio shook hands, that matter and antimatter, the world would blow up.
Well,
wait. I know it sounds like we're getting close to wrapping, and I don't want to go because it's always regret this. And I'm glad you mentioned it before. The involvement of Tom Wright. Because we are not talking about directors that much. He had been to war, and he wanted to make sure it was right. And Tom Wright, this business, we all have our Finchers and Scorseses, but this business is made up primarily of guys like Tom Wright and Kim Manners and Herb Feldman, who Edelman rather, that was a producer that spent their whole lives and never become a household word. Tom Wright was like the Forrest Gump of cinema. He had been in Vietnam. He went to art school, the same one that Chris's mom went to. He went to Universal in the art department. Just got great stories of having to deliver artwork to Cary Grant, and then working with Robert Wise and all these great
Hitchcock
and these stories of that you can go into academic books on Hitchcock and Tom's storyboards from Family Plot and a little less on Frenzy are in there. And then he did Second Unit. He and his wife Liza shot the opening of Beverly Hills Cop. There was supposed to be Sylvester Stallone, and they just film stuff. And they didn't know who the lead was going to be. And Tom was filming that. Terms of Endearment, when they go down the beach and Nicholson flies out of the car. Tom did that. And what he did on our show, the level of production, Sugar Dirt, and just like the commitment he had to this show and to us. If you can ever, I think that would be a worthy. When
Tom came on, the whole show
everything changed.
Leveled up. Yeah.
Everything changed.
He really understood that show, and he really brought his artistry and personal history.
It's one of my prized possessions. Is my assistant gave me a framed thing of the monologue where Shane's like, autumn is my favorite time and I'm never going to see it again. And it's just scripted with Tom Wright's storyboards and notes and artists of how he was going to do it. And it's just like, go on IMDb and look up anything Tom Wright did, and you'll get a lesson on how to make a movie.
Yeah, for us to, when we've covered other science fiction shows as well, there's names that reappear or names that like David Nutter is someone that's like, oh, you want to sell your pilot, you get David Nutter. Like you look at his career and there's a lot of first couple of episodes, even Game of Thrones is a big thing, is recent for him. Or Charles Martin Smith is a big one too, who's also known very much as an actor, or Jesus Trevino, and there was just so many people like that we kept coming back to. But yeah, Tom Wright, he was the recurring, and it really did feel like he got the show, like he got the feel of the show, got the vibe of the show, and kind of brought out the best performances. I
have color Xeroxes that he gave me of concept art. He did the concept art. The famous shot of Apocalypse Now with the helicopters coming over the waves is Tom Wright. And Tom's original artwork is up in the Coppola Winery up in Napa Valley. And he's just like, I love him. And his wife is a great writer as well. And we always do these and it goes so fast and your questions are great. And then we go, oh, shoot, we didn't mention Tom.
I think for Glenn and I, it's really always important when we do these things because, it's so easy to get lost in the me of it all. I'm here and I'm being interviewed, but these shows and these movies, they're made by lots of really amazing people.
Dave Duncan, who's did a lot. Every time we needed a ship designed, he did the hammerheads and all. And
especially on space, there were a lot of firsts. There was a lot of things that hadn't been done in TV in that way. All the CGI just wasn't done at that time.
There was Tim McHugh and Glenn Campbell came with us. Charlie Goldstein was head of production at Fox and came in, and Jim Wong and all these guys, the models, blah, blah, blah. And Tim McHugh's like, I think you could do CGI. And we're like, what's CGI? And it just sounded, what? This sounds nuts,
Yeah. So it is important for us to make sure that everybody's mentioned. Yeah.
Now the next question is meant to be mine. But Ryan was meant to rewrite it, and he hasn't. So do you want me to go ahead with my original wording?
Now remember, Rachel's a good Aussie girl, so there's going to be some swearing in this. But I'm sure you'll be good
swearing.
As long as there's no kangaroos.
Yeah.
No kangaroos.
All right.
No, we'll swearing. We're good on the swearing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just swear away.
My tablets here, this is exactly as I wrote it last night. And Ryan
swear
was just
away, my friend. You're in good company.
You can't ask it like that. It was well documented that Fox as a network was unsupportive, to say the least. What did they do to fuck with you? And why did they want to fuck you so bad?
Yeah.
Well done. I'm so glad we got to hear it phrased exactly that way. That's great.
I don't know if I've said things in the past. I know some shows I would. I think everybody there wanted it to play. There was a guy who was the head of the network who had come from the Hallmark Channel. And so a war show.
He didn't like it.
He didn't like it. And he was there a year. I don't even know if he was in the business a year later. And so, but the people under him, again, Bob Greenblatt and Peter Roth and Dana Walden, they all supported us and they wanted it to work.
But they were at the studio more.
Yeah, they were at the studio, but Greenblatt was at the network, and they just it came whatever, 3 episodes out or whatever. Is Jim and I would meet with them and they'd be supportive and stuff, but we've all been there, someone's going to break up with you, or the body language. And I just Jim and I be in the car on the way back, and I'm like, we're fucking over. Well, and she's like, well, we could do this. I'm like, no, we're dead. And these characters are going to end as heroes. So sorry.
And also what we were doing was so different at the time. So when they gave notes, a lot of the time they were trying to bring it back into something that they could sell, and that I think ends up being, and a lot of things that, Glenn and I have worked on, it ends up boiling down to how can we sell this? And if it's something that they don't know how to sell, they want you to change it. they don't want to learn how to sell it different. They just want you to change it to be something that they could sell. So, when you go back and you look at the way that they marketed the show, or the way they kept moving it around, which was really the death of the show, is putting it on Sunday nights at 7:00 or something like that. It was just
which they swore they wouldn't do.
Right. It was just terrible. And they kept moving it all over the place, and you didn't know where to find it. It was hard to find an audience, and people hadn't seen anything like that before. Sci-fi was Star Trek. And so we were doing something really different. And they, it ended up being stuff about what was our hair going to be like, and we're trying to do all this really big, new and interesting stuff. And, there were things like that just became, that got in the way, I think. That that there were notes and things like that. That's, I think, and the main part where the network failed us, obviously, was they just never put us on in a time slot that anybody would be interested in watching it in.
Yeah, because when going into this, Rachel knew that it was cancelled and that it was kind of like this contentious thing. And being a fan, I have the DVD, I listen to the commentary tracks, in which, may I add, I love them. They're very frank. I've never heard commentary tracks be so frank about certain things. But you read stuff and you go, oh, like, did they hate the show because they keep doing this? Like, you're not allowed to say testicles or something, or other, something like that in one of the episodes. Or you're not allowed to point a gun at people's heads or something like that?
Well, that was everywhere. That wasn't just us. But I mean, because they put us at 7:00. And so United States at that time, there was certain things you could do at 7:00. And so I said to them, I'm like, my brother said testicles in the X-Files. And they're like, well, that's on at 9:00. And I'm like, it's a hit show too, right? And they just like, well, you wouldn't say I'm waiting for my vagina. And I go, I know I wouldn't, because it's not funny. Like, testicles is funny. It's a funny word. And like, we got a big fight, and we wouldn't cut it out. And then they cut it out. They cut it out on us. They go, don't you want control over your show, and cut it out? I'm like, whoa. How more Orwellian can you get? You're telling me I'm going to control the show by doing what you want. And I know that word was left in Canada.
And I think also, the other part of it is that, Rodney, in retrospect, Rodney Morgan and I think, you go, okay, sure, they're the leads, but we were all a little not like everybody else on TV in a weird way. I mean, I was a young, actressy looking girl, I suppose, but I didn't really seem like anybody else at that time. It was always harder for me to get jobs in that way because I didn't seem like everybody else on TV. And Morgan certainly wasn't like every other lead guy. And Rodney was, really different in his own way. So I think we were all a little bit left of center. Like, who's, and they were always looking, who's the breakout? Who's going to be the breakout? And I think Glenn and Jim specifically didn't want that wasn't what we were doing. We weren't doing a show of breakouts. So there was a lot of like unknown territory there, and we didn't fit exactly into the mold of, they would say like, oh, we're 90210 in space, but we were not. We really were not that. And I think that they really wanted it to be that because it would have been easier to market.
Hence you get stuff like R&R, for instance, which kind of has a bit more of that feel in parts. It's like, let's have Wang and Danfoos play basketball and probably have romantic stuff. And then at the end of the episode, it's like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, there's this sense of we don't want to do that.
Well, and then Coolio and
Duchovny, right?
Duchovny, he does a good. That was nice.
Yeah,
he did a favor.
Yeah, but they kept wanting it to be like that, and it just really wasn't like that. And I think they wished that it was, because it would have been easier. It would have made their jobs easier. But that's not what we were there to do.
Yeah.
One time I was like, we're in the marketing, and I'm like, blah blah blah, and an executive's like, hey, the head marketing guy, you like hockey. You could talk to him about hockey. I'm like, why can't I talk to him about how they're not promoting the show right? He's like, he would love it if you talk about hockey. And so I don't know, somewhere I come across this guy and I'm like, yeah, the Kings. Wow, yeah, Luke Robitaille, that was a great goal. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. And he's like, you know what? I like you. I know what I'm going to do for you. I got a great idea. And I went back to Jim and I'm like, hey, talk hockey. We're going to get a good ad. The ad comes out. It's like a fake recruitment for the Army or the Air Force in the year 2063. None of our leads are in it. None of our spaceships are in it. I want to take back my hockey time.
I wasted hockey time on that. Yeah, it's always a balancing act between, it's an industry, there's a business, but also there's an art to it. Like, I know James was talking about how, it's fair to say that McQueen is the big, like, he is a breakout character. We all love McQueen. He's one of the favorites, but like marketing around the silver-haired older guy was not in vogue in comparison to the young hot cast. And even though us fans of the show, like, well, McQueen's kind of like a big draw of it, and yet even going on Google, you can barely get any promotional pictures of McQueen and the group and everything, because it's like it just wasn't a focus at the time.
Right, but they were willing to put him immediately on the 24.
Mm-hmm.
Or, not immediately, but...
And also, let's get him to narrate the show, right? Because that happens too midway through the show. It's like, oh, now we need a narration to explain the pitch of the show. Mm-hmm. And we use McQueen.
They called it a saga cell.
Mm-hmm. A saga cell, called.
Yeah.
And it makes it sound like he's the main character now. And, there's definitely more of a focus. But I guess with all of that, how did you, both find out the show was canceled? Like, what was the big breaking point and what was the reaction? Obviously, Kristen, you as a performer and actress, but also Glenn as the person who's having to write the stuff and deal with these people. What was that whole kind of blow up like for you both?
Well, I think we knew it was coming somewhat because, in order to, they wanted us to have a certain number for our ratings. We had to be, I think, they wanted us to be, I think X-Files at the time got somewhere in what was like a 20 share, and we were getting closer to like a 14 or something like that. If I remember correctly, it was something like that. And so for them, they wanted us, for the amount of money that they were spending on the show, they wanted us to be more in the X-Files. They had an expectation that we were going to do those kinds of numbers. But that show had been already on for 3 years by the time our show was on. And they didn't give us the same kind of time because X-Files it wasn't, a ratings hit its first season. If I remember correctly, it sort of grew. And by the time we were on, it was like, it had its own time slot and it had been there for years. So we understood what the expectation was, and we were all really did our best to bring that. We really wanted it for all of us. We really loved doing the show, and we knew that there was, and even though we had 22 episodes, unlike modern shows where you really only get 8 or 9 episodes to explore, even though we had those 22 episodes altogether, I felt like we were just really hitting our stride towards the end, that we had gotten, the backstory of all those characters. And so now we were ready to move forward and get into exploring those relationships and what could happen next. And we just, they just moved us around so much and just really didn't give us an opportunity to find the audience. And I know that there are so many people over the years who have found it. You guys are obviously, you're young people and you've found this show. So still other generations have found it and loved it. And I think that it would have been something that would have gone on had they just given it a chance. So, but we knew that that was going to happen. And he called us in and talked to us about killing us off.
Well, I remember I probably talked about this in the commentary, whatever, and it was I guess the last episode, I remember, but it was like, I don't know. Maybe Morrison got his leg blown up or whatever, and they're bringing him in, and then Tucker comes up to him. I'm trying to remember this, and he's like, Vansen, oh, we put out a search party or something like that. There was 2 or 3 lines. Vansen, Damphus, we're going to have a search party. This person, and then Tucker goes like this, and like Jim Koblenz, who had been a long-time collaborator with Jim and I, was just like the two of us in the room, and I'm like, cut out. They sent out a search party. Cut that out. And so then Morrison goes, Vansen, Damphus, and he goes, it doesn't look good or something like that. I think it was like, they put out a search party, but it doesn't look good. I'm like, cut out. Doesn't look good because they put out a search party. And then you go, cut out. They've sent out a search party. So the line becomes Damphus, Vansen, and then Tucker just goes. And, the two of us are like, oh, man, wow, that's pretty powerful. And I'm like, okay, leave it that way. Because I wanted them to go out as heroes, and I had to go home and explain what I just explained to you, to Kristen.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, if the show comes back, she's alive, we'll figure it out, blah, 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 blah. But I knew it wasn't going to happen. And I'm sure that Joel has told you that somehow there was a snafu and he wasn't told.
Yes. And even Morgan didn't realize that. He was like, oh, I thought that was in the script. It's like, buddy, I don't think that was in the script the way that it came out in the end.
No, the Tim McHugh and Glenn Campbell, the visual effects guys, who were really good friends too, they called me up one day and they're like, we're not creating that effect of the ISSCV blowing up. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, we like Wang and we want him to live. I'm like, is this a mutiny? I'm like, you're going to make that thing. No, you get a big fight. I'm like, hey, we'll figure it out. I knew it wasn't coming back. But I'm like, I promise you we'll bring him back, which probably would have too. But, that was just like really powerful. And it's just like, if it was an opportunity, to talk about sacrifice, which is, we don't have that in the United States anymore. You sacrifice for others.
That's a beauty of like things kind of coalescing in a certain way, because it becomes such a powerful thing. I know when we were getting towards the end, Rachel was very concerned, like, oh, it's not going to have an ending. It's just going to kind of, and I having seen it, went, it has an emotional kind of resonance at the end. I always think of, and I don't know if this was the same thing in the editing bay too, but at the very end, you have Cooper coming in, and it has a quick flash of Wang is dropped in there, and it's like very evocative, very emotional, and it very much like the ending of the show. Yeah, we didn't get to find out about like the silicates or this, but like because of the nature of what you guys had to work with, it does have like that kind of cap off of like, well, what you just said, like there's sacrifice, and that's kind of the nature of war. And these two people who were adversarial at the beginning are now brothers in arms in a way that they wouldn't have understood at the beginning. But thanks to the journey throughout the 22 episodes and this final one, they really get it. And so do we. And we just sit in silence. That's the thing too. We talk about Shirley's music, but that's one of the most memorable things is the lack of any.
First of all, that was like really astute. That was like really terrific. Second of all, was Shirley Walker that goes, no music here. So, and then I everything you said is exactly right. But for me personally, I'll always look at that as Jim and I, because putting a show and pitching it and getting it together in Australia, and, and then Kristen and I, it was a thing we were ever going to have happen. And and then you're just like camera rising up on those two people, just like with their asses kicked. I'll always see that as Jim Wong and I.
Yeah. And I, when you guys were talking about that, I think that probably, when she says Semper Fi, my friends.
Yeah. That still gets a great amount out of us. That's one where music really swells with that too. And that's because, we always talked about on the pod that, some of the episodes may not have always been the greatest gripping plot-wise, but it was always character-focused. And so when you end the series more on the emphasis on the character stuff, even with people not making it, it rings true. Like, I know there are fans out there who, and we're going to ask this now, like, what would you have happened in the show if it kept going? Like, what would this war have looked like? What would this have happened? But like, with what we have, there isn't any misunderstandings or vagaries about what we did with the people we spent the time with. And that's like one of the great, like, how often can you say that with a show that gets canceled in the first season? Not all the time. Not even Firefly. Firefly had to get its movie to kind of get to that point too. But I mean, in your eyes, Kristen, what would you have liked to have happened with Shane if this series did keep going?
She fights intergalactic kangaroos hiding in water.
No.
Ever the writer. I think, when Glenn talks about Shane being the mother, I think that sense of protection and ferocity that she had for the other people in the 58th, I think, to expand, her role as captain and to begin to evolve in that way, I think would have been interesting. I think that those characters are they have their own things, but they're also so interdependent on what's going on with the other people. But certainly the fact that she was elevated to captain and whatever comes with that, I think would have been a really fun thing to continue to explore and to lean in even more into, the strength and and how she grew as a human being and learned to kind of build a family and have love that she hadn't known before. I think, to begin to, as her onion peels, explore some of that stuff too, I think was, she really evolved from the beginning.
She did. And I guess, Glenn, for you, was there much planned out ahead for this series? Did you have any specific ideas of what could have gone on if you did get a second season or more?
Yeah, there was, it was not that planned, but McQueen coming home without a leg. Our family had a very dear friend of our family had lost his leg in Vietnam, and his life is shortened by it. And it was just like dealing with that. And the McQueen, who was raised to be a warrior, who could not, and that the enemy was getting closer to Earth. We live walking distance of Frederick March's apartment in The Best Years of Our Lives, which is all like one of the best movies ever made about coming home from the war. So it was a lot about that. And then also I remember it was that somebody would replace McQueen, a female character who would be ranked above Vansen, and the other people would get back together, and that commander was an asshole, but Shane kind of liked her, but then have to come to the understanding that the commander that you looked up to was not really very good and was endangering the lives of others. It was a very common situation in Vietnam. So I think it was going to be like, that's my memory. And they put on a Mamma Mia.
Thank you. The Chigs finally break into a musical number. They've learned our language real good.
Yeah, that's why they don't attack.
What a great singer I am.
They don't attack because they've seen Mamma Mia.
Yes.
Yeah, and they just go home.
That's it. Yeah, because there's a lot of loose stuff there that you kind of wonder about, like, what would they have picked up this, or was this, like, super specific details. Like, on the podcast for us, the thing I would have loved to have seen more of was the political side. I thought that was really great.
More UN.
More of the UN.
More UN.
And that's interesting too. Like, so many novel, interesting concepts within this series. Like Earth was not united, like each country was still independent, but the UN was this governing body, and you still don't get that fully. Like The Expanse has the UN runs Earth, but Earth is pretty united as an entity. And there was just stuff like that. Like the Silicates were my favorite faction in the group, and I was like, what would you do with them? And it's kind of like you can kind of do anything with them because they're just so all over the place in how chaotic they are, but also, you know, you get all these actors to recur in these crazy roles. Like we loved Elroy. We loved Elroy L. He was just such a freak. Each version was a different level of freak. But you've already kind of given us the stuff, but Rachel, is there anything else you wanting to press on or ask here?
Well, you've obviously brought up the helmet quite literally. Was there anything else that you took home from set?
We had an M590 for a while.
We gave that away. We gave another helmet to the head of the Writers Guild.
Who did we give the M590 to? Did we give it to Ethan or?
Yeah, I don't remember. We have one of the smart grenade is still upstairs.
Yeah.
And then I have I don't know what you call it. It's a plaque.
I don't have anything.
That is the Saratoga. And it's just this like this is like, you know, Captain Morgan and Wong and like all
they gave Glenn all this stuff. Nobody
I
didn't even
sell it.
I didn't even get a jumpsuit or anything. I had the plaque that was my name that was on my dressing room. I have that.
You didn't get the pool cue from
No. I wish I had thought about that. I think that at the time it was such a
that was my dad and his brother
and volatile.
Yeah.
Everything about it was just very heightened emotionally.
Yeah, she's telling you about my window.
Yeah.
It was an old C&R clothier, and actually on the grounds where Tara from Gone with the Winds and Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show would have been nearby where we filmed. And I just like, the show's over, it's canceled. I got to clean out my office, whatever I was doing. And I'm up in this like, you know, window overlooking the soundstage. And there's the ISSCV and all this stuff, standing sets. And I was just like looking at it, you know, just, you know, reflecting. The stage door slides open and like a dozen guys come running in with mallets and just start whacking the sets. I was like, hey, what the hell is this? And it was, you know, Fox had hired some day laborers to come in and destroy the sets. They were later used in like LA firefighters.
Mm-hmm.
To first
Joel said he worked on that and got to see the set burn. So lucky him. Lucky him.
Yeah.
Which that's the thing too. The set was great. Like you could see the money went into the show when you go to, you know, the hangar bay and you have the cockpits rise out of the ground. They look like coffins. Mm-hmm. Like each episode, our characters are being put into little coffins. It kind of felt like, which tonally matched with the kind of dread things were. But obviously, you have us here. But have you had any particular interesting, memorable fan interactions over the years when it comes to space? Because also, from my understanding, this was a show that you guys were online at the time, right? When it came out, like people were chatting online and stuff about it. But what have been your interactions with fans like over the years?
I just did my first signing. Like I never had done any of those before. And I just did one recently. It was my first one in New Jersey. And a lot of people still, you know, I had all these things that I had done. And so many people were still space fans. And, you know, that's always, you know, I feel such an affinity for space fans because you're rare creatures, you know, that you're the rare bird of fandom because not that many people know about it. It's hard to find it. You know, a lot of people suffer through a lot of bad copies of DVDs that are not put out well, and or you're watching your mom's old VCR or whatever the thing is, and so, you know, and a lot of space fans are military people who are in the military, so it has a special place for them. And that always made me feel a certain sense of pride that, that I could be associated with people who had really risked their lives for the country. And it brought out the patriot in me. And then I think, so I don't know, space fans are really special people. I always find them to be people who love space have a special place in my heart because it's the show means so much to me. Shane Vansen will always be one of my most favorite. And I loved her so much. She was such a complicated person. And so I don't know, the interactions of space fans, and some of them have become friends. And so, yeah, they're just really special people. I think they're the most special because they work a little bit harder than everybody else.
Yeah, there was a guy, I think Barry Caldwell was a fan.
Yeah.
And then he became a script supervisor that he actually worked in a show I did in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
The commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, he was like, huge fan. What else I was gonna... Oh, and then one time, Tucker Smallwood comes up to me. I think it was Tucker. And he's like, I'm online. I'm talking to these people. It was just only AOL at the time, I suppose. And he's like, could we name a ship the Lacey Beach after an astronaut that had passed or something? I wasn't aware. I'm like, sure. And I go, Lacey Beach. Okay. And then I'm in the editing room one time. And then I look up and there's this man in orange flight suit. He's an astronaut, and he like gave us some stickers. He's like, want to thank you for naming him the Lacey Beach. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, this is weird. And he had gotten on a jet, F-14 or something in Houston, flew to Los Angeles, drove to the set to go, thanks for naming that aircraft carrier and the space carrier Lacey Beach. And then he flew back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We had really high ranking.
She was invited to go watch a space shuttle and
and fly with the Blue Angels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn wouldn't let me do
I nixed that one.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. But I mean, we had a lot of really interesting people who are fans. The space fans are the best because
I'll let her,
work hard.
She can't fly with the Blue Angels, but I'll let her swim in a pool with kangaroos.
See?
Yeah. There you go. He knows his priorities, right?
Tricky.
Only one type of angels, and they're angry ones. That's what we like.
That's right.
They're all in black. They're assholes in the pilot.
Yeah.
Rachel, what's one of the last ones we've got here?
Well, are there any other behind the scenes stories that you would like to share?
No, we swore to God, we're not going to take up their time over 2 hours. And now we're breaking.
I know. We were like,
I know.
Ours,
Mordekaiser is a windbag. He can go 2 hours.
Well, in all fairness, again, for us, we wanted to talk about the show because not a lot of people talk about the show. And then literally I'll search for you guys talking about the show and it will be 2 seconds in a conversation about X-Files or Final Destination. I'm like, I want to know about space. So if we can get these people here and talk to them, but I don't know if there is any other interesting little tidbits that you want to share or people could know about.
Do not worry at all about taking too much of our time. We are very willingly giving it, and we're very excited that you're willing to give us your time too.
I think they are all little tidbits. I mean, I worked on a movie that Charlie Martin Smith directed. And of course, Charlie was in American Graffiti. I don't know if it's known, he was screen tested for Luke Skywalker. And he taught me a lot about on-set etiquette and stuff. And I had the honor to hire him. But he had been a feature guy. And so the first day that we were shooting with him on Dark Side of the Sun, he was like, okay, what are we going to do? I'm like, whoa, what do you mean, what are we going to do? This is TV. And that was tough. And then he came back. I think he did Pearly. He was great there. We had Leslie O'Neill, who was an NFL defensive lineman, and he just drove up. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy's not even going to make it. The set's too small. He was I don't know, he's 6'8" or something. And he was banging up against the roof.
I think for me, just the cast, those people are all so talented. And, some of them work more than others, but each one of them, to me, I thought they were all going to go on to be, huge stars. They're just all they were so funny and so talented and young at the time, just really finding their way. And the way that you got to sit back and watch them all grow as actors and people. We laughed a lot. Joel was an incredible mimic, and Rodney always had these lines, the whole jeeked thing that came from Rodney. Because he said, "Yeah, that's what you call." Did we explain it in the show?
It's just something
you don't
said
know
all the time.
You don't know where jeeked came from. Jeeked was a Rodney thing because he had been a model, and he would say he would call someone who was jeeked meant that they were GQ'd, like from the magazine, GQ magazine. So if they were jeeked, it meant that they were good looking or it was good. And then it just became part of the language that we used with one another. And then it got incorporated into the scripts somehow. And I think it took on a life of its own. Lanai was like so graceful and so funny and so smart and kind of mischievous. And James is obviously an extraordinary actor, and whenever I had scenes with him, they're always some of my most favorite scenes in the show because he was just so great to work with. And Tucker was such a professional, and when he came on set, there was just, he changed the whole energy because he's such a powerful actor. And Morgan, some of his performances on the show are some of my most favorite. When he lets you see him, because he's kind of guarded, but when he lets you see him as an actor, it's just extraordinary. So I think for me, it's the things that I remember about watching the cast and watching them grow and seeing how talented and incredible they all were. I think those are my favorite memories, and just them making me laugh. I love to laugh, and they all really made me laugh.
I was going to say, you have to have some levity in a show where you guys are traumatized and crying and bombarded in pretty much every episode. Like, rarely did you guys get to have a fun time as characters. And then we got to see that kind of incorporated in the show, like with Joel's impression of McQueen of James Morrison, which is still great. And yeah, it's with space, one of the things that I just can't wrap my brain around, and maybe you guys can kind of give us a bit of a business behind the scenes stuff, but like, where is it? Like, what's happening with it? Like, the best, like, we have a British DVD of it that allows us to have the pilot for a start, but like, people have to upload it on YouTube because it's not anywhere. Like, what is the current state of the ownership and distribution of this show? Because from my eyes, it always kind of felt like Space got cancelled, got a brief run, and then it's just been like buried far and deep. And I just find that such a sadness, especially because of people like you, Glenn, who, are recognizable. Like, you've been a part of so many big projects, and yet this thing is just, fans have to put it out there.
I don't know. I think Jim and I have to look into if anything reverts back to us. I suspect a bunch of the music that we bought, the Johnny Cash and X and Patsy Cline, may not have been negotiated to run forever. There's episodes I wrote at 21 Jump Street that REM came to us and said, "Can you put this music in?" Or I'd use this band X in, and it's on Peacock now. And I said to Kristen, I'm like, "Oh, you got to see this. I'm really proud of this episode." And then this ghastly music, like the X and REM, is like ripped out, and just like some guy with a synthesizer, it took 30 seconds to go, wow. I would never watch it again. And so Chris Carter told me that the same thing on Millennium is we use so much licensed music
It's like one of the reasons why Murphy Brown doesn't really exist as strongly, because that had like a licensed music up the wazoo. Like it ends with
that's interesting.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. And same with Ally McBeal. I think they had a lot of licensed music. They used a lot of music.
Yeah.
I was just curious because, like, is it now a Disney? Because it was Fox, right? So
yeah, Disney probably owns it, but I don't know that, it's been so long and there comes a point where certain things revert back, but I hadn't checked into it. It does it. And then, and then I remember I was shooting Final Destination 3 and I was just said, talk to the Fox guy. I'm like, hey, my friend Julie Ng, who the DVD that you saw, that her documentary, her behind the scenes thing, she's just like the preeminent behind the scenes documentarian and a great job. And as I talked to Fox, I'm like, hey, Julie Ng's going to do for us what they did for what the British document, the package that you saw. And I was like, great. I was really excited. Everybody will participate. And they're like, yeah, we're really excited about that. And then literally an hour later, I was getting text messages from fans going, the DVD is coming out at Blockbuster next week. I'm like, what? And I go, I just talked to this guy. And then I call Fox like to scream at him. And then they didn't take my call. And I was like insane with anger that day. I had another interview like this. It's like, let's not do it. And so I don't know. I don't. It just got the shaft from the get-go.
Because even with the age of streaming and Disney owns this and international, it's all over the place. Like when Disney Plus came down here in Australia for like a month, Millennium was there and then it was gone. And then X-Files is there and then this and Lone Gunman doesn't exist. We don't have that anywhere. And like so on and so
that's
on.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it just,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, at least not, for us, but like, yeah, space is just one of those things where, love to recommend it to people. And it kind of feels, at least for me, feels kind of gross but it kind of feels weird to be like, you can watch it on YouTube from some fan who's given a remaster themselves because they care that much about the show. But it's like, it's weird. It's just one of those things where it's just like, unfortunate, a part of the identity of the show is just like, just whoever owns it, like they just don't care, or it's just kind of gone and fallen between the cracks. And I wasn't too sure if, with how things have shaken up in the industry, if there is a chance that it could surface again on one of these sites.
I don't think there's any chance. I mean, we're in an era now where they're pulling off Westworld because they don't want to pay residual fees and stuff like that. So they're not going to go back and pick up a show. It's I would have thought somebody would have asked about a reboot, and I haven't heard that, and I don't know if that would appeal to me really, but there's just all that. I know we filmed it wide so that when the advent of high def came in, that we wouldn't be this, and that was all for naught. And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question, but it's always money.
Yep, that's always the case. Like even with our DVD, for some reason, it would stretch it to be widescreen, and we have to physically put it back to the normal because I'm like, this isn't right. And there's rumors
they shouldn't have to do that.
No, exactly.
Well, the Blockbuster DVD that came out, the menu had like spaceships, and we're like, what the hell is this? I know the show pretty good. What spaceship is this? And it was from Babylon 5.
Yep. That's people post that in groups as like a little funny thing. Like, hey, in B5 group, here's this. Hey, do we all remember the famous season of B5 Space Above and Beyond? It's like,
and
no.
was that Babylon 5? That wasn't a Fox connected show.
No, it was a like PTN show or something. Or it was Warner Brothers.
Right. Oh, that's right. You're right. That's right. Yeah.
No one, but distributions are weird. But I guess we have our last big question here, Rachel, and it kind of sums up a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, which is the series really hits upon many heavy subjects and interesting ideas and profound themes. And we would love to hear from both of you. What was the big message and point of Above and Beyond for you?
Well, you go first because
Well,
you
I go back
created
to
it.
that other answer.
I'm just going to say whatever Glenn says.
I thought it was going to be what you said earlier.
I think that I'm there for you. We have parents of 4 kids, and that's the most important thing you can be as a parent is to go, I believe in what you're doing. I believe in what you want. I'm going to sacrifice things, career and things for you. And that's the way I show my love is that I'm there for you. I believe in you, and I'm going to help you get to where you want to go. That's what, to me, the show is. And, it's like I wish our world had a little bit more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because there's just so many things that the show was treading on and running with. You have like the corporate stuff and you have the political, you have the war, but it really does come down to a lot of it is what you just said there, because that's definitely one of the most like profound things I walk away from it with.
Yeah, it's a show that's well and truly about humanity in all of its facets.
Well, to wrap it up to the fiction of war class that we started out with, that was like, whether it's, the Trojan War or some war in the future, it's never, you end up not fighting for your country. You end up fighting for the guy next to you. And I think that's what the show explored.
Well, that is all. Do you guys have any upcoming projects or things in the works or stuff that you'd like to tell people about or inform people about?
Intergalactic kangaroos scored by ABBA. That's all I want to see.
That's all you want. Well, you have to write it.
I know, man.
Can you involve Tony Todd in it? I love Tony Todd, and you've got him.
Yeah,
in that pocket.
Of course. Yeah, we love Tony Todd too.
Yeah. But is there anything else, or are you guys just keeping it easy? Because it's been a hectic time. Like I follow Kristen on social media, and during all of the stuff in the industry with the strikes, and you guys were involved and out there and doing stuff, and other cast members. But do you guys have anything in the works, or you guys just sitting back now?
We both did writing. We both wrote stuff during the strike.
She has an excellent female horror piece that try to get going. It was like she really did a great job, and that was like
I have my new life coaching business that I do because during the strike, it's just you're just not busy enough. So I went back and did that, and hope to help other people who are in the business or people who need to talk. It's always when I was taking care of my kids, I had so much interaction, was able to help people, and so I miss doing that. So I mean, we're still writing and coming up with stuff, and I audition every now and then, but so we're doing it all. We're doing a little bit of everything, but I really like people and I really like helping them. So it gives me an opportunity to.
But we're really greatly appreciative. Sorry.
Yeah, you stepped over my nice thing that I was saying about people.
I don't know.
That wasn't very nice. All right, go ahead.
No, we really, I really appreciate that, people like you have kept it alive. I see your font down there, and that for a show that was canceled almost 30 years ago, that it's still talked about is just like overwhelming to us because of what the show is about and how close we all are. And I'm sorry that we went so long, but it's really greatly appreciative to you and everybody that ever lays eyes on it.
Yeah, thank you for making it for us and giving it out there. I think still to this day, it's probably the favorite series we've podcasted about, because it had a lot of just things to talk about emotionally and ethically, and we talk about the production and stuff like that, because some of the episodes would end, like some of the episodes would get pretty pretty muddy and raw, like especially like the second last episode, the whole crew is just wondering, should we possibly commit a war crime, like kill an innocent person? I don't know, maybe, and stuff like that. But yeah, we've had a great time talking to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time and telling us all of this stuff that, I think for a fan like me, I don't have often get the ability to find this out because, this show is near and dear for us, but I just don't feel like it gets talked about as often. Like we would mention always that it sits in an interesting place in the sci-fi TV tapestry and canon, and yet it doesn't get the recognition I think it deserves, especially for the pedigree that's involved in it. Like we, a friend of ours watched the show with us for the first time, and then after he has his own podcast and he did some of your movies, Glenn, and then he was shocked to be like, "Oh, it's the same guy," because Black Chris,
two ends.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm like, literally, Kristen's in one of these, like she's in Black Christmas, and he's like, yeah, but he's so much meaner in these ones, and I'm like, oh, you haven't watched the X-Files, but I'm like, but this show was mean this show could be brutal at times, but it's like, yeah, but there was this kind of like optimism in amongst all of the tragedy of it all, but. Yeah, we loved it so much, and people. You set it up at the beginning. Pags, lovable character. We all loved him. We all were rooting for him to make it, and then he gets killed to show us the point of the series. So we always say, a cheers to Pags.
Rest in peace.
We always raise a glass to Pags to end things off on. So. I think we'll do that. So, can we all?
I think I have a shirt that says Pags Payback. They came out with merchandising, and it says Pags Payback, and I'm like, Pags? That's the shirt they made.
We all loved Pags. Okay,
it's great. Yeah,
a lot of people did. Yeah,
that's how it works. But well, until next time, everyone. Can R.I.P. Pags. We all remember the great legend that is Pags.
Semper Fi, my friends.
Yeah.
Semper Fi.